Welcome to the Draconic and Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Syrenne from Draconic and Friends, and I'm joined as always by Alan Hazelden, the head Draconic at Draconic and Friends.
Hey.
Today, we're joined by Eli Rainsberry, who you may know from their work on games like A Monster's Expedition. How are you doing today?
I am doing okay. It is really miserable in the UK right now. It is like the most typical scene that I think you can probably see if folks are familiar with the north of the UK. But yeah, I'm doing all right. Slightly on the sleepy side, but that is just my default setting these days.
I feel that too hard. Can you sort of give yourself a more full introduction for people who don't know what you've done or aren't familiar with your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Ellie, and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a composer and audio sound designer. I've been specializing in making music and sounds mostly for video games it must be like at least 9 to 10 years now, but probably more like full-time-ish from like 8 years or something. The things like it's broadly like anything between the realms of animated and interactive things that I really enjoy making things for. Most folks here, as Syrenne would say, would know my work from A Monster's Expedition, but there's also my collaborations with the folks at Hollow Ponds, like Flock, and the Wilmot games, Wilmot's Warehouse and Wilmot Works It Out, which is the last game I've worked on and my most recent soundtrack. And I also really enjoy working on narrative games. So my past games for those were games like Saltsea Chronicles, No Longer Home, and If Found. And yeah, that's kind of the kind of games I've done. Like, it's usually quite a mixed bag of things, which I try to do where I can.
So, because you've worked on so many types of games, you've worked on narrative games, you've worked on, let's say, different types of puzzle game. I love the Wilmot series. They are a distinctly different type of puzzle game to A Monster's Expedition, as an example.
Thank you.
How do you integrate genre into composition? Is it more that you just kind of ignore that and think about what the player experience is generally going to be? Or do you try to, like, in A Monster's Expedition, I'm sorry, I'm jumping all around with this.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Because like, that's a really good question.
Yeah, the
music.
music.
I'm also kind of like, it's interesting because like I thought about like sometimes I think about like how the player could like perceive or approach games in a musical sort of sense. But also like there's some stuff where like I feel like I've kind of let myself be selfish in a way that I try to do things that I also enjoy, and the folks that I work with trust me with going ahead with the thing, and like it mostly ends up working out anyway. But yeah, I think it's also just it's all very project dependent, I think, when it comes to each musical part of a game that I've been on.
Gotcha, yeah, because like on Monsters, I'm thinking especially like, so for people who have not played that game in a long time, I'm assuming most of our listeners have at least played a little bit of the game. After the first, let's say, 2 minutes, which is like this is the opening theme of the game, the music will kind of fade into the background as it is letting the player solve the puzzle. Yes. And then it kind of comes up in intensity and volume between islands, or as you're going on a raft journey, or like there are a lot of structured moments where the player is maybe not having to lock in and focus. But when they are needing to lock in and focus, it is pulling back a lot. And so I was wondering if that is a larger part about how you think about genre, or if that just was what you needed to do for this game in particular.
I think definitely the latter more so, because I think like genre-wise, I think that was kind of like a very like ever kind of changing thing. Like I think like fundamentally it was always going to have some kind of acoustic palette, and I think that was like even kind of a core part to like the very early stages of developing music for the game, because I was like, I've been like looking back at really early notes for the audio development for the game, because I don't remember anything. Complete disclaimer, I really don't. So anything I've done, anything I've like thought about, I've gotten in this big nice notes app in front of me, and like there was some things that have definitely like have been kept in some way from like the initial sketches that go as far back as like 2018. Alan, can you believe?
Yeah, I mean, you were working on this game through multiple iterations of its identity.
Yes, yeah.
I guess, yeah, one question I had for you is like, how much do you remember the goals for the music changing throughout development as the identity of the project changed versus how much was like the music just like a through line that like we could have taken a piece of work from 2018 and used it in the released game? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, so the things I had noted was like I'm going to like refer to like the soundtrack names, but the tracks for 3 the Archway, A Sit by the Water, which feature in like the first biome, and To Cross the Seas, which I think is like late kind of midway through, where I think the palette slightly changes from being more acoustic to more electric kind of guitar based. Those tracks are probably like have got the closest sort of seeds from those really early sketches. But I think like the palette has generally like slightly changed. I think things were a lot more polished much later on. I think like hopefully if you remember, like I think it was even within like some part of like 2020, like leading up to the release, where I think I actually finalized the actual sound of the music palette a lot more close to how I wanted it in my head. And to answer like the earlier question, in terms of like what came up for the game at the time, I think like it wasn't so much a genre thing. It was like, I think there were some notes. I remember like there was been on and off kind of like discussions I'd had with Ben for like the direction of the music. And obviously Ben would be someone I would collaborate with in terms of the implementation, because usually for implementation, I like to have a collaboration with the programmer and kind of like bat off like what can work dynamically. And I think like there was some early ideas where things were quite rhythmic at first, but I think later on, I think like it was like late 2019 where I've actually have got our meeting notes. This will be all good to say, I hope. So basically we kind of agreed on how like we got a strength of this like dynamic audio approach with like having quite reactive audio. It reinforces the actions, and we wanted to kind of strip away more of the rhythm from the backing of the music at the time, because I think that was what was going on, and having that kind of more ambient space from here on out. And I think the rhythms kind of came a bit more through the UI audio in some way, like having more percussive elements here and there. And I think that ended up with a slightly, I think, better experience in terms of like not having the repetition go too annoying on anyone listening in. Hopefully that all made sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the Monsters Expedition soundtrack and like the audio implementation is still really impressive to me. One question I had for both of you, if either of you remember, that opening raft journey with the title card. Obviously, some version, I think we told this story, some version of that mechanical interaction of like you accidentally discover the raft had existed in earlier builds of the game, and then it got moved up because that's like the moment. And that's great. My question is the audio there. Which came first, the final length of that raft ride or the length of the track? Like, was that scored to it? Or, Ellie, did you know what you wanted to do, and so the world map had to change to accommodate it?
I think it must have been like me trying to sync up to the timing.
That would be my guess.
Music, right? A timing of like the raft duration, right?
I started working on the game right after that got locked. So I never actually saw any of that discussion.
I should have grabbed that.
I doubt there was a discussion. I think we just had the world, and you were writing music for that moment.
Yes, I tend to like writing music to synced moments quite accurately where I can. I think I approach that kind of thing a lot more linear. Like, so I think as long as I knew the kind of duration and what kind of timings there were happening, then I think it was quite a straightforward sort of thing. Although that being said, I think like what I probably wrote, I imagined the kind of timing of the actual title card would be based on when the kind of music comes in fully at that time. So I imagine that was probably a bit more synced to what I was doing. But maybe my memory was not great around then.
Yes, I assume we would have implemented the music and then tweaked the timing of the title card.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it seemed like it worked as a good build-up if a few folks like that.
Awesome. Alan, do you have any... I know you just said that you don't remember anything. Do you have any specific memories of working on the game, or memories of feelings rather, where once the music was in, it started to feel more real, or like you finally like heard a draft of the music that felt like it? Like what was your perspective of working through the soundtrack implementation for the game?
Yeah, I'm curious.
I don't have any specific memories, and for a lot of the later part of development, I really was just in a state of permanent hyperfocus.
Yeah, I think that was the case with all of us, honestly. Like, I think during the last, I think it was like the summer, spring before release, I was kind of just like locked in a way of like, I know where I want to go with the sound. I kind of just want to go for that. And I think you were the same with your own things.
But also the last 9 months of development being the first 9 months of 2020.
I was going to say it was the start of the pandemic, everyone. So I think a lot of us weren't in for like a good time just on that end already. So I think any sort of like low energy I felt around that period, it will probably be just more related to the world collapsing. And continuously collapsing to this day, you know.
Too true. But having said all that, I think the thing that probably would have landed to me most while we were making it was like these moments where we suddenly trigger more music than there's been in the build up to it. Like there's specific islands, and when you step foot on that island, it starts playing a longer track. And I think all of those moments are really special in the game.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think what you're referring to, so I think that's like when you enter a new biome for the first time, to my memory.
I'm not sure if we have one changed for every biome. I think we maybe have fewer of those. It's often a new biome, but it's also like we kind of, when planning, we divided the game up into like several acts. And there are fewer acts than there are biomes, but a lot of the time we'd want to introduce a new act with the first time you'd see a specific biome.
Yes.
So I know
maybe it was
the first
an
time.
act.
The first time you go to the wintry biome. Well, there's a couple of similar wintry biomes, but the first time you go to
the first wintry biome.
Like that was an obvious place to like mark a transition, and it's also a point where we're like, in terms of the pacing of the mechanics, it's also when we're introducing something new.
And then just a little bit after that, in the same act, this is just if you're going on the critical path, minor spoilers, by the way, for people who have not played a Monsters Expedition, you end up at the roller coaster area, and that also has like a bespoke musical theme, I believe.
Oh my God. Explicitly, I don't remember doing that.
Excellent.
I remember, like, did we still? I mean, this might be like spoilers as well, but I remember doing something like a ferry-go-round sort of carousel.
There
like,
is a carousel.
There's a cursed carousel. Yeah,
cursed carousel. I remember that. The roller coaster. I'm gonna have to like dig through that later.
Yeah, I don't remember specific music for the roller coaster.
I remember there being I think it might just be parts of the track dropping out because there's the screaming of the roller coaster going around.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So it might just be that, but yeah, I do remember that the music changes every single time you go over there for the first time, and that's just a fun part of the map in general, because it's one of those things where you go into, once you realize that you can zoom out once you're in a post box and see the whole world, there's like 5 exhibits I think total that like peak above the fog that are like big monuments of where you will go, and one of them is the roller coaster.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, and worth saying, Ellie, you did both all the music and all the sound design of the game.
Yes.
So, yes. Other than the carousel, are there any exhibits that really stand out to you for doing sound design on?
Ooh, that's a good question. Again, this is where my memory is just like incredibly dusty. I feel bad. I feel like I should have played the game again.
From memory, there's some good squelches with the sentient lasagna.
Oh my god, the sentient lasagna.
Yeah. The zoetrope has like a really very low hum. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
What
I know, like with the carousel, like with that coming up in my head a bit more, I think that was probably just the more memorable. Sort of thing.
There's the merman, the reverse merman.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of exhibits didn't have sounds.
No, but a few
it's a few very
most
specific
memorable
ones.
Did.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, there's some like the sounds I think I remember the most enjoying is like I guess the ones that combine the more musical sort of elements. Like I think the whole dynamic musical build up when you're pushing the tree about and that sort of thing, and the role. I will always be proud of that role. And what else? I think this was a sound that like I think I had in earlier versions of the game, but there's like the like simple transition sounds I had where it was just like a little it's gonna sound cursed, a mouth blow, like of like the transition of the fog fading away to reveal the other island when you go over.
Yeah,
there's probably going to be a much better way to phrase that.
There's a little bit of a whoosh in the final game.
Yeah, the whoosh. Yeah, that's just like a man-made, human-made whoosh sort of thing. So yeah, I think just having little subtleties and more like analog acoustic like sounds is always the sort of thing I really like.
What was the inspiration behind turning undo into a rhythmic percussion?
Good question. I mean, I think it was probably more the kind of like we had like, I think going back to an early thing that we were talking about in terms of like having like less rhythmic aspects in the music. I think I still wanted to find ways to have that come through in some way in the whole soundscape, but obviously we can't have it like too tight to rhythm because it would kind of clash in some way or another. So I think I just like experimented as far as I can remember with the types of percussion that would resonate with the kinds of UI that would suit things. So like the smaller sort of like sounds would like be more clicky, or the undo sound like would be a bit more of a little cymbal hit. And I think the other like what helps to not make it too annoying is probably like variating it a little bit. I've got the F mod file like right in front of me because I'm like, there's going to be stuff that I don't remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I just have numerous iterations of the undo sound that will just like repeat multiply. So it's just a bit different each time. So
it's funny because this is a broader thing, and that's very funny. I was half expecting you to say that Alan came to you and asked for it, because one thing that I've noticed in practice, I've watched a lot of people play this game, both when it came out as producer and then just as someone who has like sat friends down or family down and be like, play this game. I worked on it. One thing is that there's a lot of pride that can come with a puzzle game of not wanting to use undo and reset, especially if you're not very familiar with the genre. And once, like, almost like clockwork, once someone feels like the soundscape is interacting with them using the undo mechanic, they no longer feel bad about using the undo mechanic.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty nice way to go about it. I mean, I don't think it was like a idea that like, I think it was like percussive stuff was generally like an idea I wanted to have, and it's something that I like to try in like the games I usually do sound design on. Like there'll always be a bit of a subtle percussive element to it. But yeah, Alan, I don't know if you had any particular
No, I
think
you just pitched like, hey, I'd like to do this.
Yeah, I appreciate the trust in me with that. So yeah, I think it was just as straightforward in that. And yeah, I think if a sound like that is able to make things feel accessible to the people playing the game, then I think that's a really sweet bonus.
Yeah, I think there's a playfulness to all of the sound design.
Yeah, for sure. There's also like the other side of the scale where like there's sounds to make that can like reaffirm the kind of direction you're going, and I guess in some way where the dynamic hits when you're moving the tree about can be one thing. But I think about there was in moving to like to a different game, to Wilmot Works It Out, there's a few kind of UI sounds. Like obviously this approach is a lot more kind of synthetic and a bit more in key and tune with the music going on in the game rather than like percussive. But I had a few people talk about the UI sound that I made that happens when you're about to connect a puzzle piece to a correct section. Just like a little synth beep, or like it won't be as like harsh as a beep, but like a little subtle hit before things click in. So again, that's like another, I feel like, nice bit of accessibility in some way of like reassuring the player that it's okay to do one thing like that as well, or you're either going towards like the right sort of track, or it's okay to go back to the start if you need to, like with a Monsters Expedition with the undo button.
So moving further back in time than Monster Expedition, how did you get into audio design and composition for games in the first place?
I think it's kind of like a mixed bag of things in terms of like the actual interest towards like making things for games. I didn't really think that it was kind of an option for me to explore until I remember like a collaborator at uni sent me the soundtrack for the Sword and Sorcery EP, the video game soundtrack by Jim Guthrie. And hearing like kind of more guitar orientated work as a guitarist when it comes to like in-game soundtracks was really inspiring. I think it was the same when I came across game soundtracks like Transistor, which would be Darren Korb, I think. So just hearing stuff like that was like, oh, this might feel reachable for me. Like I was always like, you know, I'd obviously be always interested in games in some way or another growing up, but I didn't think much of like the route to it at the time. I think doing university, for example, I was mostly interested in film and I was kind of going more towards that route. On the side from games, there's also like I'm really like animation, and there's like animated shows that were kind of branching beyond like the traditional orchestral stuff you'd hear from like the kind of Looney Tunes genre of animated music. So there's shows like Avenged Time, for example, which was like really abstract and the sort of thing that I just didn't think would be a thing in most animation until now. And there's like really thematically driven music, like in shows like Steven Universe, and the composers. Shout out to, I hope I pronounce your names right, Ivy and Sarasu. I believe came from like games adjacent backgrounds, and like the instrumental palettes and textures are something that can be heard quite easily in certain game spaces too. And it felt just a bit more at the time kind of more realistic to me to reach as someone kind of at the time experimenting with more synthetic approaches to composing and producing music at the time, and combining these ideas with what I enjoyed the most when it came to working on bits of short films and animations and seeing the collaborations that happened between like director and composer. I felt like it was just a very natural way to go for me. And yeah, I kind of started having a kind of look into hanging out in those spaces. Moving to London for my master's course was especially a big deal, because I think that was like when I started going to just small indie games events. I was also volunteering for some like indie games events over the summer for Feral Vector, if anyone knows of it out there, of course. Just being in those sorts of spaces just really encouraged me to like want to like work and just hang out with like-minded people. And I think a combination of those things physically, plus having some like work I had, I think, online on SoundCloud or something, would have just eventually led me to being reached out by, say, I think Ricky Haggett reached out to me on the website that was Twitter for the first Wilmot game. And yeah, I think eventually you, Alan. So it would have been, that probably would have been 2018 sort of thing.
Yeah, 2017, 2018. I don't remember.
Well,
I don't remember the timeline. I don't remember if there was a specific soundtrack that had in mind, or whether it was just like having met you in person.
It probably was the latter, because I knew that I don't know whether Amaze of 2017 that year was when we first met properly, or whether it was a bit before or after then. But I knew that we definitely hung out in some way or another at that event. So
yeah, I mean, we were definitely talking about this game with collaborators and or potential collaborators at Amaze 2017.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think. But yeah, I guess that is kind of just like a broad nutshell in how I've navigated going into spaces. I think like routes are quite different for everyone, sort of thing, but that was my kind of route. Basically just being in like the physical smaller video game spaces like made quite a big difference, I think, to just meeting people.
And choosing a more niche puzzle game, how did you come to do the soundtrack for Jetstream?
I knew you were going to mention Jetstream. I had it in like the background of like just being like, I should have mentioned that I worked on Jetstream as like.
I mean, it's not a game that I expect a lot of people to know. I consider it a masterpiece of theming a game to a like to have like a like theming an abstract game, giving it something concrete that actually works for the gameplay. Because a lot of the time it goes the other way around. You have a setting or a theme, and then the gameplay comes from this. But this is a game where it was just an abstract line drawing puzzle, and they found a framing for that puzzle that like actually made sense and like reinforces the gameplay in a way that's really impressive.
Yeah, like shout out to those folks. Was like it was like definitely it was one of the first like smaller games I worked on. This was, I guess, like this was pre Wilmot, I'd say, because I would say like Wilmot was probably like the first kind of point where everyone started to perceive me TM in some way or another. But Jetstream was one of the smaller games I worked on. And I think at the time, I think I was like, I remember I must have been doing my masters at the time, and I feel like it was that time period was a bit of a cesspool of like the things that I was just working on multiple things whilst trying to get through this degree. So I unfortunately don't remember as much of the production, but in terms of how I got into it, I might be wrong. I don't know whether I might have cold emailed or like there was like an open thing for people to apply to like work on the game, and I did that because I would have done the whole like, I don't want to say hustle culture, but like I think everyone has kind of had that period where they are kind of just trying to search for numerous jobs and work in like either game spaces or in my like film spaces on my end sort of thing. So I was just looking for bits and bats, and I'm pretty sure I might have reached out to them. I could be wrong. Please call me out for this if I am wrong. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay, not just my end.
Your technical difficulties jingle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Okay, so Jetstream. Yeah, I don't remember the full details of like the actual development of when I worked on the audio and music for it, because I remember I think I was just doing my masters. It was one of the few projects I was doing my masters or my last year of uni work at the time. No, that would be a lie, because I think I took basically a gap year between my undergrad and postgrad, and probably try to find work and work on stuff. And I'm pretty sure that working on Jetstream, I might have reached out to them. I don't know whether they had like an open call to like look for someone to do audio work, but I'm pretty sure that was that. Like people out there are free to call me out if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how I worked on the game in the first place. And I guess, it would be technically the first puzzle game that I would have worked on in that way. I think what I probably remember, I'm just trying to think of more around it, I think it probably was more of a direct implementation sort of thing. Like we had to just music go into engine. And things are coming back to me now. I think it was developed in Hacks.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, so and that was actually, I think, also the software that we developed Wilmot on, because that was also a direct music implement. So it would be more like lines of code where like music would come through in that way. So I think that it was kind of like a bit of a work to those sort of limitations based off that. So yeah, I think like I hopefully just did the best I could with the kind of setup I had there. And you're
saying Wilmot was the game that was like a little bit of a break for like getting more work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, I was working on, a few other games at the time. Like I think like there was like a platformer runner that I was working on for a bit at the time. And there was also No Longer Home. And then like I was approached, I remember, over DMs by Ricky Haggett for Wilmot, which I think at the time I was a bit like slightly starstruck by, because I knew about the work from Hohokam, and that was like, I remember that being one of the first sort of indie games I would have seen played, I think on like a on a big display by like my other friends at the time, and being really impressed that game like that could exist. So yeah, and I think like because of I think how folks knew about Hollow Ponds beforehand, the trailer that we did for the initial Humble Bundle release of Wilmot, I think that was the point where it was probably a lot of people's first impression of me. Like I think I had like a couple of folks I know reach out to me to possibly work on stuff just off the back of that. So yeah, I probably consider Wilmot as kind of the catalyst at that in that way, because of like how it just started to kind of take me off in some way or another, really.
Where, this is maybe slightly a loaded question, but where do you want your career to go? Like, do you want to keep working on small team indie projects for games? Do you want to branch out into something new? Are there new challenges that you're interested in?
That's a really good question. I feel like the pipe dream for me, even though all the creative industries are crumbling, even though the animation industry is crumbling, I would love to work on an animated TV series that is on a similar sort of vein to things like earlier shows I mentioned about, like Adventure Time, because that was just like one of the main kind of sources of inspiration, and my background has mostly come from like linear writing for stuff, so that would be like, I think, something in the future that I would love to explore if it was a possibility. But in terms of like game spaces, yeah, like I think just maintaining a small like games team and like collaborating on those sorts of projects is probably like the sort of thing that works best for me. I think like on the main projects I'm working on at the moment, the core teams are anywhere between either just us two through to like 4 to 5 people tops. And I feel like I work quite well in those spaces just because it's really easy to kind of check in with each person where possible and kind of have like a closer collaborative relationship from there. I think like typically, just from my experience, like the smaller the team, the better it has been for just bouncing off ideas and feeling like you have kind of more of a footprint on the game in a way. Like it feels like you're a bigger part of it in a way.
Did you feel difficulty with that with Monsters Expedition?
Yeah, I mean that was interesting because I think like the teams, like I think I remember it changed in numerous ways, and you know I do want to, like, if it's okay to do, like shout out the folks during the pre-production process, like some of those folks I've ended up working with later on, and like has really helped shape what I wanted to see in like game dev sort of spaces. But yeah, I think like as long as I have a couple of points of call for who to talk to with music stuff and like audio implementation, it's usually okay. Like I have definitely worked with a bigger team post Monsters Expedition. So my kind of method is like just having specific people to talk to without having the pressure to talk to others who aren't part of the audio workflow in a way. So it's like not too bad in that kind of sense. Like it's definitely like a workable thing for me to work in like bigger teams. Definitely not a rule out, don't worry. But yeah, like my preference has always just been in like smaller teams. I think that's just how I feel like I've always worked best anyway.
Yeah. And has there been anything you've done since Monster Expedition that you're particularly proud of or you want to like talk about the development of here?
Yeah, I think there's like a couple of projects that I think like have expanded into like stuff that has hopefully kind of pushed me towards like just being hopefully better in how I approach, like, say, like implementing music and audio stuff. Like Saltsea Chronicles, for example, was like, I'd say my most ambitious narrative sort of project because of just like how much there was in the game. A lot of like dotting between like numerous music points and having just like massive Fmod events to kind of host each music for an island, and like kind of like having numerous sort of narrative points to bounce off between. And there was like 6 to 7 hours of music in total, or something. So I think like that sort of thing has really kind of pushed me into like figuring out how I worked, like specifically when writing for hybrid instrumentation and palettes. Like I think that was like the first time I kind of pushed towards like more cross between like synthetic writing for music and traditional, like having more like strings and brass in there, for example. And then there's the ongoing collaborations with the folks at Hollow Ponds, so with Flock and Wilmot Works It Out. Flock specifically was one of the first projects in a while where I've only just worked on the music. And we had shout out to my friend Dan Pugsley, doing sound design for Flock. And that was really interesting it was good and interesting as a learning process, just because like it was the first time I had another audio person to kind of bounce off ideas with and have some kind of, I guess, rest towards like the implementation side of things, but also having a more like collaborative approach on where we can go in terms of approaching how music would like play back during certain events. I think had some slight like sound design contributions to it, or like voice emotes, but not loads. But okay, I feel like Flock is probably one of the soundtracks where I feel most comfortable with establishing its kind of palette. And I was initially like, I wasn't sure whether to like kind of homage like Hohokam in some way or another, because I didn't want to just make it like a too much of a pastiche. But then one of my friends who had previously worked on Hohokam enabled me anyway, I remember. So I kind of just like lent into it. So yeah, I think like from there onwards, I think I became a bit more confident. And also I think what I appreciated with the collaborations on both Flock and then like Wilmot Works It Out is that I had like a lot of trust put into me when it came to approaching music stuff. With Wilmot Works It Out, it was a quicker turnaround than I'm used to. I don't do that often because that is just not my speed. But a lot of the work on Wilmot Works It Out was music that I hadn't initially like made or conceptualized for smaller or personal projects from like 10 plus years ago. And they're a bit weirder, they're a bit proggier, and I had a chance to have those come to life in the game, and nobody like stopped me from those, basically. Like nobody told me to be like, make it less proggy, please make it more commercial, etc. I just got no notes during that production, and that was like really reassuring in some ways or another, just in terms of like having that kind of trust in what I was making. And yeah, I think like it kind of reassured me that there's like hopefully a space in the audio sphere for just weirder time signature pushy sort of pieces of work, like in the recent Wilmot soundtrack.
Awesome. Do you have any questions for us?
I have a couple. So the first question I thought and this doesn't have to be me, and this is a good chance to shout out the other good audio folks that have worked on other Drachnik games. But what's been a most favorite audio or musical moment across the games from the games that you've put out as Drachnik? And this can be either developed or published.
I mean, I think that the two that come to mind are the title drop on Monster Expedition.
Yep.
And the theme song for Spooky Express.
Yeah, those are the two. I was, as soon as Alan started to go first, I immediately thought I'm gonna need to come up with a new answer because he's just gonna take those two. I will say maybe a little bit of a curveball. I really like how the music contributes to the atmosphere in Bonfire Peaks. So Corey, who directed and did most of the development of that game and its DLC, also did the music himself. He's also a musician. And
nice, yeah.
It's very moody and just atmospheric, and I think it really sells the narrative theme of that game really, really well. Additionally, the fact that the DLC is a little... The 3 DLC chapters have a brighter color palette and therefore have a brighter musical palette, I think really works really well. But like Alan said, it really is the 2 themes. It is the theme of monsters when you get the title card drop and everything is timed perfectly, and then it is Priscilla just going off in a corner for a day and then coming back and saying, I wrote a lyrical theme for Spooky Express, here you go.
Yeah, that's sweet. That's something I want to work on future stuff, doing. I'm not so much of a songwriter, and I feel like that is a slightly kind of weaker point when it comes to the things that I work on. So I don't know when I'll be doing stuff like that, hopefully in the next couple of years or something. But yeah, it sounds like Priscilla is kind of just on it when it comes to setting the vibes of games like Spooky Express really nicely.
I mean, I think that also Spooky Express was just generally exactly her vibe to begin with. So I think that definitely helps that it was already a game that was basically custom designed for her sensibilities.
I can't remember the name of the manga, but that hole in the wall, it was made for me.
Yes, yep. Mm-hmm.
When there's a game project or just any sort of thing that you find that resonates with
that
you.
Manga
and
is
you're just
a little bit more
yes.
horror than Spooky Express, but yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's just the same energy. Apply that to the non-horror games.
Yes, no, for sure.
Coming up next from Drachnik, Jinjo Ito Express.
Oh my god, no.
I mean, I'm all for pushing towards, this is going to be very controversial for me to say maybe, but pushing the anti-cozy pipeline.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna if you want an M-rated puzzle game that isn't offensive, that's one way to do it, is just go all in on body horror.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why not? Yeah, I think I'm obviously I'm not going to be able to talk much about the newer projects I'm on for a long while, but one of the games I'm working on actively is extremely different, I think, from what people have usually heard from me in past games. I'm just looking forward to be able to share that when that's ready. It's just already going to be a lot more nicely experimental and less cozy, more nasty.
Exciting.
Yeah, we'll see. I do have another question, and hopefully this is phrased okay, but feel free to ask me to rephrase. But What is something that either of you would like to see, or rather hear, be encouraged on like a musical or audible front in future puzzle games or future puzzle spaces? Like whether that's like a dynamic kind of thing that you haven't heard try yet, or want to hear more of that kind of thing.
So personally, I think that audio for puzzle games is generally pretty hard, just because so much of the gameplay takes place inside your head, and you don't usually want your brain to be so focused on like melody when you're trying to come up with like a practical solution. At the same time, even though my brain, like, I'm a musician by growing up, so I'm like, I am always like, give me melody, but then when puzzle games are in place, it's like, all right, no, turn the volume down, I need to focus.
Enough of that.
Yes. I do think though, dynamic music is something that I think works really well. I feel like there's room for a puzzle game that utilizes the dynamic music as part of the solution. Such as like, what if the solution to every puzzle involves like a musical scale, and so by hearing like you don't need to know the music to do it, but like the music can provide an extra avenue of either validation or like sanity check or something about your. Anyways, this is all very vague, and I apologize, but like I'm just thinking about.
I mean, like kind of similar to that, Can of Wormholes does something similar, which I don't think I consciously picked up on while I was playing the game, but it's constantly doing like a look ahead of like how many moves are you away from winning the level, and it kind of plays escalating sound cues as you do the correct moves to get to the end.
Yeah. Okay.
And it does it subtly enough that I think you wouldn't really notice it unless you were particularly listening out for it. But it adds another layer of like dynamicness, and also like it's congratulating you for solving the level, but before you've solved the level, which is very interesting.
Yeah, like, so I guess it's effectively like a warm up towards like a reassurance for the player, being like, you're getting there, you're on the right track, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And for me, yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in seeing dynamic audio. I'm generally, my instinct is just to let the composer play, and like if they want to explore a weird, unusual direction, great. Like, and if they think it works, then great, I'll support that. I'm not enough of a music person to ever like really suggest a direction. And so like I think that's part of why I am inclined to just leave it to whoever we're working with and go like, hey, do your thing. But yeah, I think I'm always going to be happy for somebody to like have an idea and go like, well, this is a bit unorthodox, but what about this?
Yeah, no, it's I always like appreciate like that kind of like steer when it comes to like music direction from devs. Like you definitely don't have to be like musically inclined or knowledgeable to like have like a gut feeling of like where you want things to go, and having that kind of trust in your audio person is always a nice way to go about it. Like I'm sure that there's always like a side of like an extreme side where like I think the lack of direction is where I would get stuck if I was just told to be like, good, like play this game, good luck, and then just be like, like that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think for
like,
Monsters Expedition, Ben was giving you more of the feedback and direction than I was.
Yeah. No, at the time, like appreciate you, Ben, if you're listening, for the conversations that we had over that time for working on the game. Like I think, yeah, that kind of bounce off point with anyone I'm working with is always a nice help for getting those like right steers in. Like I'm always happy to like getting any sort of music brief and like an idea of the kind of palette or like the art concepts. I always like seeing art concepts when it comes to seeing the initial sort of game. And like I'm a sucker for playlists. People are usually a bit weird about sending references to audio folks, but I love them. Please give me them. So like that sort of thing is always just nice initial steers, and then I can just do my own thing until I can then bat off with either the developer or the narrative person that I'm working with and going from there. So yeah, no, I think those are good approaches nonetheless.
Awesome. If there are any other questions you have, let us know. Otherwise, we can wrap up.
I think I'm all good. I don't have many other notes.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you again for joining us. It's been lovely to catch up with you.
Yeah, no, it's been really, really good. Again, it's been so long, and it's been nice to like get my brain out the sieve to try and remember the things I like have done on.
Can you believe that a Monsters Expedition is almost 5.5 years old?
I mean I can, but also it's just like the passage of time now is just so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nuts, but yeah, that feels about right. I feel like I've learned a lot more in terms of audio things from a Monsters Expedition onwards. And yeah, I feel like whenever I'm next working on good puzzly sort of games, it'll be able to be nice to translate the sort of things I've learned now to those.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing your continued work in more games, especially if you end up working on more puzzly games. Where can people find you online?
Finding me online, I'm not so perceivable online these days, weirdly, just because I'm very burnt out from the internet.
Fair.
But I am reachable nonetheless. So I'm Eli Rainsberry on pretty much many of the platforms that you think of. Blue Sky and Instagram are probably the most reachable places for me these days. And my music is available on Bandcamp. So that's just my name, ellierainsberry.bandcamp.com. And that's pretty much, I guess, the main music platform to support me.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for listening to the Draknick and Friends official podcast. Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoisemusic.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrantis. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.